you. Yeah, it's my passion. You know, I love to do it. You know, it's just it. You know, I found what it is that I needed to do in life. You know, I taught for 27 years, and I loved every minute of that. And now I'm just teaching older people and something different. And it's a passion that I love to do, and it's worked out. Can't complain.
I recognized a couple of the locations there for sure. Mount Evans, some amazing shots you have up there of the goats and that up there, and then Bosque del Apache. I've only been there once and was amazed, but some of the ones that you have up there of the sandhill cranes, just the formations of that are something else. So.
Thanks. Well, I made a lot of trips down to Bosque. I used to teach for the Festival of the Cranes when they were holding that.
Okay.
And then doing my own workshops down there too. And, you know, so I've made a bunch of trips down there, but, you know, it still doesn't guarantee, you know, you never know. You could make one trip and come back with 10 great pics, or you can make 10 trips and come back with nothing. And that's what wildlife photography is all about, you know, and that's what makes it a challenge. And the greater the challenge, the more fun it is.
I was going to ask if you took a brush up to Mount Evans and brushed those goats, because all my goats look like the ones that look like they have a half a coat on every time.
You got to go either really early in the year or late in the year.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. So I call the ones that you do like in July, the Rastafarians, because they look like they got the dreadlocks and everything, you know. So I don't go up there when the goats are looking like the Rastafarians. I go up there when they're, you know, like hopefully shed it out, and then you're selective too. You know, if I see one, it's just, you know, a mess. Even if it's doing something good, I tend to not photograph it because it's not a subject that's appealing to everybody.
Well, the one you had of the one that was backlit, where literally, I mean, the light all the way around the perimeter of it was just, I mean, it was like perfect all the way around it. There wasn't a spot of it that was missing. It was like ideal.
That was the one that I was going to talk about as far as how you got to nail the exposure.
Yep.
And how critical that is. So, you know, it's a matter of knowing your camera, knowing your system, and how to adjust for a given lighting situation. You know, when I say that it's all about the light, there's a reason. And the reason is because it's all about the light. You know, it's what we do. You know, we're writing with light. So.
Yeah, awesome.
So do we want to take a 5-minute break or just go right in? I mean, how many people we've got? Just like 7. Why don't we just go right into it? And then this way people can kind of end early. And I mean, it's not as if we've been in it for a long time. So let me just get right into part 2, and then we'll go from there. And if you have questions, we'll take it from that point. So let me bring up the second part and do another screen share. And okay. All right, so welcome to part 2. We'll make it official. Like I said, we got about 30 pictures here that appeared in a slideshow, 25 to 30, something like that. And I'll give you my thoughts as far as behind each capture. And each one is going to illustrate one of what I call my photo mantras to help you attain better images. If you have questions, use the chat window. Or, I mean, with only 7 people, you know, if you have a question and you want to chime in, we'll see if we can do it and just kind of go from there. So here we go. So some of the things that I talk about all the time, as I say, it's all about the light. That's my business tagline. And to me, light is the most important ingredient in any photo. Another thing that I say all the time is that the background is equally as important as the subject. You could have a great subject, but if the background is very distracting and you can't make out the subject clearly from it, doesn't matter what the subject is doing. It's going to be busy, it's going to be confusing. So be very, very cognizant of your background. Another thing I say all the time is exhaust all possibilities, and I'll go into some examples of how to exhaust all possibilities when you're out in the field. Don't let your tripod get concrete feet, especially if you're photographing any aspect of nature, whether you're doing wildlife, whether you're doing macro, whether you're doing scenics. By moving your tripod, by changing your position, by getting up a little bit higher, by getting a little bit lower, you're changing what the background of the picture is going to look like, which in essence will change what the photo looks like. So don't let your tripod get concrete feet. And so we were talking about Bosque del Apache before. I can't tell you how many times you see people, it's like they get territorial. They take their tripod, they put the 3 legs down, they set up, and they wait for something to happen. They want the thing to come to them. Well, if something is going on at a different end of the pond, pick your tripod up and go to that end of the pond. What are the chances of missing something where you are? Okay, you can miss something, but if something really good is going on down at the end of the pond, by all means, go for it. So don't let your tripod get concrete feet. Edit before pressing the shutter. If you know that you're going to throw a picture away, take 1 or 2, use them as placeholders. Those will be the best ones you have for that particular shoot. But then you don't need to go out and shoot 100 more if all you're going to do is edit them out anyhow. So edit before pressing the shutter. If you love to spend time in front of the computer, then go ahead and have a lead finger with your shutter. But if you don't want to spend a whole bunch of time in front of the computer, make sure you edit before pressing the shutter, and then be real cognizant of your exposures. Watch for blinkies, check your histogram, look at each individual color channel, and base your exposure on what it is that you are seeing when you see it on the LCD. Or especially now with mirrorless, you can see it live. If you can't remember all of the above, come on a safari with me and I'll remind you often. We'll just get you to hopefully come back with a whole bunch of better images. So work the light to its fullest. As I said twice before, my business tagline is it's all about the light. What does the word photography mean? The word photography is made up of 2 words, photo and graphy. Photo means light, graphy means to write. What are you doing? You're writing with light. So make sure that you are writing using your best penmanship, using your best words that you can synthesize together to make it poetic and make the picture look beautiful. Sunrise and sunset, they're very warm, very directional. Those are the times when you want to be shooting. So just to show you how different light can be, these 2 pictures, this one and the next one you're going to see, were made within minutes of each other. And here's the one that was made right at dawn. It was made in Tanzania at the Ngorongoro Conservation Area, a place called Lake Ndutu. In April, the lake is somewhat dry, so you can drive to different sections on it. Here we had the rising sun reflected into the water, and in the previous picture, it was the light, that early light shining just on the flamingo itself. So, you read the light, use the light to its fullest, and take advantage of it so that you can gain the most out of whatever pictures you're going to go out there and capture. Just to kind of give you an idea, when wildlife appears at sunrise and sunset, that's when we as photographers, we get super excited. It gets our blood flowing. Fire away when you're bestowed this kind of light. And you get a magnificent subject in magnificent light, performing action. That's what it's all about. The one channel that you want to really be aware of is the red channel, because sunrise and sunset light are both warm, and the reds, yellows, and oranges are going to blow out first. So bring up that RGB histogram and base your exposure on the RGB histogram, primarily the red channel, so that you don't blow out the reds. If you blow out the reds, you can't recover them, and the picture is going to be lacking in detail in those very delicate bright spots. So make sure you're aware of that. And here's one of my favorites, where I love to shoot backlight. It provides drama, it provides intrigue. Look for situations where you can get a glow. So what was happening, it was a chilly morning up in Alaska, and this Grizz had just come out of the out of the sedge, and it was eating on some grasses here, and it had that the carbon dioxide coming off it, and just I kind of biased the exposure in between what was going on in the background and the mist itself, and put the exposure right in between so that it maintained detail throughout. And if you would have based the exposure here just on the bear itself, that beautiful mist that was in the background plus that rim lighting would have been really, really blown out. And here's one that shows even more of an example where you've got to be smarter than your camera meter. Look at how dark that background is. So we were talking about this just before in a question that came up earlier. That background is very dark. And I knew that. So I immediately, I started my exposure at -1.5 stops here. And I think this was down to -2, so that the glow around the goat itself wouldn't be void of detail and wouldn't get lost. And this is, oh my gosh, this is one of my absolute favorite types of light. I call it the edge of light. And what you want to do is look for a situation where a key component is going to be spotlit, especially if it's against a dark background. When does this happen? Only in early light, only at late light. And when it happens, you got to act very fast, because the animals, if you miss it, you can't tell the animal to go back. Hey, could you go back to that one spot because I missed it right where the light was hitting your face. I mean, this lasted but a half a second, maybe a second. The little baby sheep was just kind of walking, and when it hit that one light spot, clicked away, got off a couple of shots, and you wind up with something that is very, very unique as far as the light goes. Again, that dark background, had you based the exposure on that, would have been the background would have been beautifully exposed, but the light on the face of the baby sheep would have just been totally blown out, and it would have been a delete, as opposed to something that I can use as an example for both instructional and to put into a slideshow. Any questions so far? Are we good?
Russ, I have a real quick question. So, again, the lighting is so amazing, and we talked about earlier, where you mentioned earlier in that where you have this high contrast kind of scene like this with the backlighting on the goat, with the bear, with the rim light and so forth. Are you doing most of those in manual settings, or are you going and adjusting with the exposure compensation on either shutter or aperture priority?
98% of my pictures are shot on aperture priority. Okay. And the reason being is because, to me, depth of field is so important. That one statement that I got, Mike, the background is equally as important as the subject. How do you control the background? Sometimes with the aperture.
Okay.
Okay.
And-
So
and-
I
and-
want,
yeah.
I want the aperture to be wide open so that I can throw the background out of focus. But then what I'm doing while I'm looking at through the viewfinder, I'm very cognizant of what the chosen shutter speed is that is connected to the aperture that I have set on the lens. So if I'm doing action, if I'm not doing action, I will know that I've got a shutter speed that is correct for the situation. So I'm shooting an aperture priority, but in that case, now I know that I've got a lot of dark background. So I immediately go to minus, and in this case, probably one stop, maybe 1.5. And I think I wound up at minus 1.5 on this one, as opposed to the other shot of the goat where it was -2.
Right. And just knowing, and you have obviously enough experience in that to know how much light there is, how dark the overall scene is, where the bright spots are, and how much of that adjustment is. Experience goes a long ways, and you have plenty of that. But
it behooves you to become familiar with your gear. If you're not familiar with your gear, you know, you're gonna miss a lot of shots. So the more time you can spend out in the field, the more time you can dedicate to shooting situations that are more of a challenge, so that when you face them again, you can draw from the past and say, oh, well, in that situation, that's very similar to what it is that I'm seeing now. I was at minus whatever, so let me start there.
great. Thank you for the explanation. That was great.
Okay.
Hey, Russ.
Yes, sir.
Are you in manual focus or are you autofocus?
Autofocus. My eyes, forget about it. I can't do it. Manual focus now. There's no way I can focus quicker than what the technology and the cameras can do today. That's, I mean, autofocus has made it. I mean, there's no way I want to say it easy, but autofocus has really helped a lot as far as nailing consistent, sharp pictures. With that in mind, though, I will say something. It's very important to be aware of what focus point you have activated, because here you want to make sure that the focus point that you have activated is right on the head of this little baby. If it's in the background, you're going to have an out of focus sheep with a beautiful in focus rock. So always be aware of what focus point is active. So even though autofocus has really helped us a lot, you still need to tell the camera where you want it to focus to be the sharpest. If you would have had it on the rump of the baby here, because the rump, if you notice, it's not quite parallel. The rump is back a little bit further. So if you're shooting with a very long lens and it's not on the same plane, you're not going to get the same sharpness on the head as you are on the rump. So moving that focus point a lot is very important.
So what about those, like where you had 4 birds in flight?
Well, okay. So now, depending on the distance, if they're at infinity, infinity is infinity. So if I'm shooting with a 600 and the birds are at infinity, whether one is in front, whether one is a little bit more in the foreground or the background doesn't matter, because it's already at infinity. Makes sense?
Yes.
You follow what I'm saying on that?
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, if something is at 30 feet and at 35 feet, and you're at 30 feet, whatever's at 35 feet is going to be slightly out of focus at wide open. But if it's at infinity, you can't get any more. Depth of field is infinite at infinity, and it only makes sense using the two words, infinity and infinite. So it depends at what distance too. again, it's becoming, you've got to become very familiar with your gear and the technical aspects of photography to maintain the consistency that you want to have. Is it always easy? Heck no. I mean, I've spent a lot of years, I've read a lot of books, I've been out in the field a lot, I've done, you know, you got to put your time in. You put your time in, and you're conscientious about it. Hopefully, you'll be rewarded, and that's what it comes down to. And I'm kind of motivated and driven to just drive myself to want to get that shot. And you know, the more that you can be like that, the better off you're going to be as far as being able to get that shot.
Russ, do you shoot in back button focus?
I use shutter, and the reason being is because if you're doing back button, now my thumb has to push the back button, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, if my thumb has to push that back button, but my thumb also needs to move the focus point to a different location, my thumb can't do two things at the same time. Therefore, I use shutter release focus because I want my thumb to do one job, and that's move the focus point to where it is that I need it to be.
Okay.
A lot of people love back button focus, but it's not, if you run tests, it's no more accurate than shutter release. I mean, it's going to, the means to focus, how it doesn't make one more accurate than the other because you're using a separate button.
And in your case, the preference is being able to use that thumb to move that focus point left, right, whatever, and that depending upon where your subject is, where you want to first catch and focus as it, let's say, taking flight, if it's a bird or whatever, that that's more important than, right.
Let me give you the perfect scenario. There was a situation, we were in the Serengeti, and a cheetah was chasing a 2-month-old, 3-month-old baby wildebeest. Well, I mean, I don't know if you can see my picture on your screen, but they're zigzagging back and forth. So my focus point is constantly changing. I mean, I'm moving it to the left, I'm moving it to the right, I'm moving it to the top, I'm moving it to the bottom. How can I be taking the picture and doing that simultaneously? By me being able to move that focus point with my thumb, I can still take pictures while I'm moving that focus point with my forefinger because I'm using shutter release.
Great, thank you. No, thank you for that explanation. And that is the scenario that makes perfect sense. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if you're doing landscapes or something like that, doesn't matter. If you're doing anything that's moving, huge, huge. So, you know, depending on what you photograph could dictate what you prefer to use. Okay.
Also,
right.
also, Russ, on this image here,
Okay.
do you have a rule of thumb for how much you crop something?
If I have to crop away more than 50% of the picture, I don't take it.
Okay.
Because I need to send it to a stock agency. I need to have it reproduced in a magazine. I need to have it, you know, if you're cropping 90% of the picture away, I don't take it. You know, now if all you're doing is making a thumbnail for a computer screen or whatever, you know, not a problem. It depends on what your purpose is.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I finally broke down and bought a 600 after decades of going back and forth in my head and saying, do I, don't I, do I, don't I? And The dew eyes finally won out.
And that's the 600 prime lens. That's the
Yeah.
F4. Yeah, that's on my list to get someday.
But then you got to carry the sucker around too. and you know, and that's, you know, there's pluses and minuses with everything, regardless of what it is. All right. Oops. Okay. So edit before pressing the shutter, as I was saying. Oh no, wait, hold on, wait a second. Here we go. Okay. What does edit before pressing the shutter mean? Again, if you like to spend a lot of time in front of the computer, you can ignore the concept. But if you don't like to spend a lot of time in front of the computer, edit before pressing the shutter. One way to edit before pressing the shutter, be cognizant of the head angle. If the animal is looking away and you have no connection with it and the animal has no connection with you, stop taking the picture. Wait until it looks at you, wait until it does something, wait until it whatever. Now, if you've never been to Africa and you've never photographed a lion, and the first lion that you see, you need to take a couple of pictures, take a couple of pictures by all means. Are you going to keep them as you go through the safari? Probably not, because what's going to happen, you're going to see better and better and better, and those ones that you took initially, you're probably going to toss. So especially like if you've gone down to some of the local duck ponds, if you've gone to Mount Evans a bunch, and you've got a lot of shots of fill in the blank, think about those ones that you've got home. And if you've already got better, you know, maybe take one or two, but you don't need to take 50 or 60, because all you're going to do is edit them down anyhow. So let me word it this way and see if it makes even more sense to you. Knowing when not to press the shutter is equally as important as knowing when to press the shutter. I'm going to say that again. Knowing when not to press the shutter is equally as important as knowing when to press the shutter. Think about that next time you're out in the field. The background is equally as important as the subject. So this was a shot of a Thompson's gazelle that was in the show. And note the background. Shot with a long lens, tight headshot, but the background was far away from the gazelle when I photographed it. So by using a long lens and having the background far away, what is this a photo of? It's a headshot of a Thompson's gazelle. There's nothing in the background that's going to be distracting. It's very obvious as to what the subject is, and you want to look for these kinds of situations. So how do you create a photographer-friendly background? Use a long lens, set your aperture to its widest setting, and photograph subjects that are in the open. If this mallard had been in brush with just like fallen trees and everything like that that were close, no matter what you do, the background is going to be distracting. So look for a situation where the background is just this beautiful wash of color, and try to repeat that kind of scenario. And the more often you're able to do that, the more you're going to wind up with images that have these backgrounds that are just a beautiful wash of color and allow the animal to really, really pop out from it. Exhaust all possibilities. What does exhaust all possibilities? Never overlook verticals. A lot of people, because when you hold the camera, it feels very comfortable to hold it horizontally. So I think it was some study done, 78% of all pictures that are made as horizontals, because that's the format when you put it up to your eye and where all of the dials and buttons are. So most people make a lot of horizontals. Don't overlook those verticals because you never know what kind of impact they're going to allow you to have. So think vertically, think horizontally. And what's a huge benefit? If you make a vertical and a horizontal of every subject, now you walk away with 2 images of each animal, of each scenic, of each whatever it is you're photographing, as opposed to just a single one. So that helps you diversify your files too. Again, exhaust all possibilities. Don't overlook using a wide angle. This was made in Hayden Valley. And, you know, had I used a long lens here, it would have been a coyote walking through the snow. Well, you know, how many millions of pictures of coyotes walking through the snow do you have? Here, you still know it's a photo of a coyote, but it kind of shows the environment. It shows what's going on in the background, the burned out trees. It tells more of a story. So think about using a wide angle on occasion so that you can exhaust all possibilities. And in this way, you have 2 photos of every subject. And it really, really helps. So here you got the elephants taken in the Ngorongoro crater, juxtaposed with the gazelles in the background using the rule of thirds. And, you know, take those wide angle shots. Don't be afraid to pick up the wide angle when you're photographing wildlife, especially when you've got a situation where there's mood in the air. When you've got mood and you can show fog and the mist and all, and just tell the story of what's going on in the entire environment, that works out nicely. So exhaust all possibilities. Another way to exhaust all possibilities. So when you're photographing action, the obvious thing to do is use a fast shutter speed, freeze the action, get every water drop, get every wingtip sharp, whatever it is that you're photographing as far as it moving, make sure that you have a fast enough shutter speed. But don't overlook, as I said, exhausting all possibilities. So what else can you do? You can set the shutter speed down to like a 30th of a second or a 45th of a second and pan along with the subject that's running. Make sure that the pan is dead parallel with the subject itself, so you increase the chance of getting a sharp subject against that blurry background that you get from the panning kind of effect.
Hey, Russ, was that the picture of the birds in that mood scene just prior to that picture, was that taken in Africa?
Hold on a second, I'm going back to it. This was actually made down in Vieira Wetlands in Florida.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So again, fast shutter speed. Don't overlook your panning possibilities. And another situation with backlighting, watch for blinkies, check that histogram, make sure you're always checking your exposure. You don't want to blow out those delicate highlights. Be aware of how much dark is in the picture and start your exposure compensation from that point where you know you have to darken it intentionally. Be smarter than what the camera thinks is the correct exposure, because you're looking to create an effect. When fog rolls in, it's sunrise and sunset. That's one of my favorite types of situations in which to shoot. And if you've got this beautiful mood where the light just kind of makes it sing, you know, again, wait for something. You can see that the flamingo in the foreground had just come up from dipping its beak into the water, and it's got that little drip. So be aware of all of the little things that will bring your picture to that next level. And again, be cognizant of that red channel. That same situation where in Vieira Wetlands, this was the same day. And here was, so you saw the shot made with a wide angle. Here it is shot with a telephoto with the sun coming up. So I do practice what I preach as far as exhausting all possibilities. So here you have it. The shot with the long lens, the shot with the wide angle. So don't overlook exhausting all of those possibilities and making sure that you do bias your exposure based on that red channel. How low can you go? To me, if you're going to get your clothes wet, if you're going to get your clothes dirty, you're going to come home with better pictures. Because when you get low, what happens to the background? The backgrounds become further away. They help eliminate a busy background. What is a busy background? If you've got a busy background, it becomes very confusing. If you don't have a very busy background, it allows the subject to stand out. So this was taken at Stern Park right here in Littleton. I laid on the grass and waited for the wood duck to walk across in front of me. And had I been standing up or up in a higher position shooting down on it, the background definitely would not have been as accommodating as it is in this shot here. Again, use depth of field wisely. So this was taken with a long lens. This was shot with my 600. Well, think about it. Where am I going to put the focus point? Right on the eyes, but the nose is in front and the mane goes back far. At 600 millimeters, if had I shot it at f4, there would have been too much out of focus nose and too much out of focus mane in the background. Stop the lens down to f16, got the depth of field that I needed, so it would be covered and everything would be sharp, including that little kind of wood pillow that it was leaning on. Bring your flash. Oh my gosh. Since going to Africa, I've learned to utilize my flash, and I can't tell you how many times it's worked out great. Here was a situation where this lioness was totally backlit, but look at the light that's on her face. You can even see the highlights, the little catch lights in the eyes that were created by using the flash. You want to work the output of the flash so that it looks natural and it's in balance with the given amount of daylight. And when I run my safaris, we do a lesson on the very first morning of the safari. Lasts about, a good couple hours. And we get into this whole thing of how to use what they call a mag mod. And time doesn't allow to me to go into detail now, but if you use flash along with a mag mod, it will help your wildlife photography tremendously.
Russ, real quick, I have
Hold on.
real quick, sorry about that, a question on that one. So when you're using the mag mod and you have the flash in a situation like this, are you doing that in TTL or is everything on your flash manual?
Totally TTL.
Okay.
I eliminate, the technology today is so good that with TTL, I can, just by, now what I do, Mike, is the flash exposure compensation, not exposure compensation on the camera, but I do dial down the flash exposure compensation. So there are situations where I'll actually go plus on the flash. There are situations where I'll actually go minus. There are situations where I won't touch the exposure compensation. Here, it was dead even. The amount of light that I wanted emitted from the flash was the same amount of light that was falling on the background. So this was just boom, a no-brainer shot. But because the lioness was a little bit further away, I needed to have the mag mod so that the light that was emitted from the flash would be projected far enough away and illuminate her.
Perfect. Okay. And with the TTL, at least the camera does some of the thinking for you on the.
The camera is basically doing all my thinking. And then, of course, as soon as I take the picture, I look right down at the LCD. Maybe I'll go up a third, maybe I'll go down a third, maybe 2/3, either way, but adjusting it accordingly. She wasn't going anywhere. I mean, the sun had just come up. She was content. I could have, played with different exposures for 10 minutes on her if I wanted to.
Right.
So, it's nice when the subjects accommodate,
So sometimes they give us that luxury, right?
So sometimes they do. Not often, sometimes. So when they do, you just kind of say thanks. So one thing that I tell photographers is to compose yourself and carefully compose your images. What I mean by compose yourself is you get really excited. So you got to kind of, do some deep breathing and say, okay, I don't want to blow this because this is only, I may be here once in my lifetime to see the wildebeest crossing the river, and I want to make sure I get everything right. So what do you want to get right? You want to get the exposure. You want to get the composition. You want to get the light. You want to get, you want to look for lines. You want to look for shapes. You want to choose your lens wisely. So you compose yourself, and then once you've chosen a lens, compose your image strategically. Use form, rule of thirds, simplicity, and all of the classic rules of art that you can apply so that your picture will be composed as far as photographically proper. That's what you want to try to incorporate. And when you get to a scene, so this was one of these situations that lasted, again, a half a second. These vultures were all over. All of a sudden, I saw them starting to line up, and then boom, they all looked in the same direction, got off one shot, and that was it. But, you set yourself up for it. You get ready. I wanted the depth of field to do what it is that it did, so that the single male vulture here would be the most prominent, as it would recede into the background with the two off in the background. And notice that there's a single plane of focus as opposed to multiples. Could I have stopped the lens down and gotten everything? Yeah, but the story here are the other vultures kind of waiting their turn, and you can tell a story based on the aperture that's chosen. So you got to think quickly, you got to think on your feet, and you got to know your gear. And once you get all of that down pat, works out well. When the probability is high to depict emotion, wait patiently for the opportune moment. So here we had the mama grizz and the baby grizz, and they were interacting. They were kind of paying attention to each other. They were not paying attention to each other. The light was just magnificent, and it's just wait and wait and wait, and you keep your eye glued to the viewfinder. Wait for that connection. When the connection comes, press the shutter. Will it come all the time? Absolutely not. But when it does, it's a beautiful moment, and you kind of look up to the heavens, say thank you, and look at your LCD to make sure you got it, and just move on. So just wait patiently. Hopefully it happens. Have I been out in the field many times when it doesn't happen? Absolutely. But on those times when it does happen, it's a blessing, and it works out very, very nicely. So when you've got images of animals just standing out in the field, they're pretty much a dime a dozen. Think about everyone's going up to Yellowstone now and photographing the elk. There's the shot of the bull elk, and it's just standing there. You want to wait until it does something. Look at the title of this slide: behavior and simplicity. Yep, that's what you want to shoot for. So in this case, it is actually a reddish egret. It's a morph, and it had just caught this fish. It did the flaring of the feathers, the background, everything just fell into place. So it's displaying behavior. It's a simple picture. And again, when it all falls into place, how special and how great a moment it is. So, look for that simplicity. Edit before pressing the shutter if things aren't falling into place. And when they do, that's when you can lay on the shutter. Same thing in this situation. In this case, it's obvious why the picture was made. The Osprey had just caught a fish. The head angle worked. You can see the highlight in the eye of the Osprey. The light was good. Used the rule of thirds. The wing position was good. It just kind of, the background, just total blue sky as far as simplicity goes. So when those things work out, strive for it, see what happens, fire away when you get it. Again, not again, but keep your eye glued to the finder. Well, I guess it is again. I did say that once before. Keep your eye glued to the viewfinder. When the action heats up, it's imperative that you give the situation 100% attention. There were 4 3-week-old these lion cubs, and they were just kind of playing, and Mama was doing her thing, and when it just kind of got that moment of emotion, it's really, really nice. And you never know what the heck is going to happen. Again, we had a situation with 3-week-old cheetah cubs. They even still had that stripe along their back where the coloration is different, so they would blend into the background. And all of a sudden, like a bat out of heck, this one little baby comes running out, jumps up on Mama. Mama throws out her tongue, and it was great. So you never know what you're going to get. Keep your eye glued to the viewfinder and do all of the other things that I talked about. And hopefully, when you get out in the field, you can apply what it is that we talked about. I hope you enjoyed both parts of tonight's program. That's pretty much it. I'll field another couple of questions if you got, and we'll call it a night after that. Anybody else?
Just great, Russ. Thank you so much.
Oh, you guys are more than welcome. Thanks for getting logged on, and
I just had a couple of close. That was fabulous, Russ. Once again, what I really liked was when you ran through. When we watched the first, I'll say part 1, the sequence of all of the photos, there were a dozen in there that I was like, all right, I'm hoping that those are the ones he's going to describe in part 2, and I think almost all of those were popped up in part 2.
Sweet.
The Grizzly photo, yeah.
Well, there was a wavelength, Mike. I knew it. See, the third part to this is the magician's aspect. So, no, that's good. That's nice that happened by coincidence. So cool.
I do have a question. Another question.
Go ahead.
It's Phil. Those Vieira wetlands in Florida.
Yep.
When are you down there? In the spring?
Winter.
Winter.
Yep. February.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yep. Good time to be down there because the great blues are nesting at that time. They're just kind of building nests. If you want babies, you want to be down there a little bit later in the year. If you want them building nests, see, what I did, my sister lives in Vero Beach. So
Yeah.
what I would do is run my regular photo tour and then go visit my sister. Vieira is like 50 minutes north of where my sister lived.
Yeah.
So I would go up there a few mornings, a few evenings, and just go photograph on my own. And it's a great place. You just drive these berms, and whatever you come across, whatever you like, what will I be given today when I go out in the field, and whatever it is you're given, take advantage of.
Yeah, I've never been there, but I see a ton of pictures from there, and they're spectacular.
Good place to go.
Yeah.
I highly recommend Vieira Wetlands.
So
Now, it's been a couple of years since I've been down there, so I don't know if it's the same, but certainly when I was going down there, wow. I've never bbeen skunked, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So we just need to call your sister and set up our trip.
Yeah, she's cheap with room and board, and she's a great cook, so it works out well.
Well, I don't think it's too far from Orlando, is it?
I don't know. Orlando, I'm not sure. I always worked my way north.
Or
so,
Palm Beach. I guess you could go to Palm Beach.
Yeah.
And Russ, I just have like two final questions. One of them is it's sort of on the technical side of it, and that I'm just looking at my notes here. You mentioned on the RGB highlights to pay attention to those with the reds and not to blow the reds out. So when you put that on that RGB highlights, as you're being able to see what that gives you on your histogram, is the fix to that just dial down the same way you would if you were blowing out your other highlights, meaning just take the exposure down?
You base the exposure on the red channel,
Mhm.
and yes, you use exposure compensation identically to the way you would anything else, but it's all biased based on your red channel.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. And then one last one was, I don't think it was in your part 2, but in part 1, there was one there was a bird. I don't know what the type of it was, but there was a fish that was rising up and it was like looking down on it. How do you just timing of catching that one? Because it's one thing to catch the bird as it's got the fish. It's another thing to anticipate. What's your process for like anticipating something like that?
Learning the behavior of the animal when it's hunting. You learn to read its eyes. You learn to read motion of the head. If it was, I think it was a great blue heron. And what they do is they will turn their head like this, and they will turn their head like this, because that means that they're looking for something and they probably spotted something. So what I know that something is going to happen. So you just get ready. And like I said, keep your eye glued to the viewfinder. And if you see the fish jump, if you see the bird dive, or whatever, just fire a burst. And sometimes you're lucky too. It's knowing the behavior. It's knowing the animal. But then again, some of it is there is some luck, because when you start to click, where's that fish going to be? Is it going to be in front of the bird's face? You don't know. Is it going to be out of the frame? You don't know. Is it going to, there are some where I've looked at it and gone, oh, so close, so close. And there are others when you look at it and you go, yes, so you live with both.
And experience helps you to plan how to be lucky more often than the inexperienced side of it. So, I mean, that's demonstrated in the entire series of photos you showed tonight. So,
luck. Why is it that some are quote unquote luckier than others?
Exactly.
And you just said it. I just worded it differently.
Right. Well, thank you. Those were the questions I had.
All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Let's do this again in 2021, and we'll get another show for you.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome, Russ. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for the beautiful pictures.
Oh, you guys are more than welcome. Thanks, guys.
Have a good night.
I also envy that you are able to see all these things in person. Events.
It's pretty amazing. It's truly it's part of why I do what it is that I do, because I enjoy nature myself. So, it's good.
Yep, and you can tell.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Take care, Russ. Thank you. You've inspired me.
Hi to Rick for me. And John.
I've already done that, and he said he will.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks again.
You guys take care.
Thank you, Russ.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.